So welcome to anyone who's just joined. You've joined the Switch Online from Install to Insights with Swift, brought to you by Switchee. We're now going to make a start. So welcome. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. We really appreciate that. Before we get started, a few bits of housekeeping. We will be running for about 20-25 minutes today, but we'll hold some time at the end for questions. And if you did want to ask any questions at any point, just use the Q&A box at the top right of your screen. We'll also be running a quick poll during this webinar. Please do share your thoughts. It's really helpful to see kind of what you're thinking and feeling. And there'll also be a short survey at the end of the webinar just to give some thoughts and feedback. We really value that input. So before we get into the heart of our discussion for today's webinar, I wanted to quickly mention our next webinar in May, which will be joined by Vicky, our Head of Enterprise at Switchee, and a special guest speaker to discuss overheating. Register now using the QR code or head to Switchee online. This one, we've got that guest speaker. I think this one will go fast when it's announced. Feels a bit like a Glasgow registration, doesn't it? So get the tickets now before that headliner is announced. So now on with today's webinar, which will be brought to you today by myself and my colleague Tom, and we'll just do some quick introductions from us both. Tom, over to you.
Thanks, Sam. Morning, everybody. So my name's Tom. I'm the Commercial Director here at Switchee. My team and I, we work with both potential new customers for Switchee and our current customers as well to scope out projects that we can help them deliver on. Today, I'll be talking through a couple of real-life examples where Swift has been installed in customers and some of the results we're starting to see, and just provide a bit of insight as to how it's being used in the real world.
Super, thanks, Tom. So yeah, hi everyone, I'm Sam. I'm the Head of Product here at Switchee, and I'm responsible for many of the innovations in our data and hardware, sort of developing new insights, but also broadening out our ecosystem of sensors. I work with a team of expert engineers and scientists, and we love working with clients to solve problems using data. So as Tom mentioned, we're going to be unpacking some of the different ways in which our clients has used Swift. But before we get to that, I'll be introducing some of the thinking behind it and what we've done to kind of refine and think about the solution. So before we get to the product itself, though, let's start with a bit of a context and challenges that needed to be met. So typically when we're developing any new product or service, we ensure that it meets at least one of our core criteria, which stem from the issues that we see in the sector when we chat to our clients. So the first of these is that compliance challenge. We know that there's a constant need to meet that regulatory need. It's growing in scope. It's increasing in complexity. It's always been there, right? But in the last few years, Arab's law, renters' rights, demand from the regulator, it makes it a significant, ever-present challenge. The second is that resident centricity. So this is in Switchee's DNA. It's core to our mission to improve the lives of people living in rented homes. And we know that for many of you on this call, delivering great service levels that residents can see and feel is part of the job, is a core part of the job. But delivering that at scale with existing processes can often feel like quite a lot. And connected to this is the third factor, which is how do you do all of this while managing tight budgets, resources are scarce on the ground, and maybe processes aren't quite fit for 2026. So you're trying to do more with the same or less, and it often doesn't just lie in recruitment of folks. But the key to this may be that technology can drive measurable efficiencies in your organization. So we've got three key factors there, kind of adding up to quite a lot to balance as a social housing provider. But before I explain how we've addressed these, we want to know if this is your dynamic. Does this resonate with you? So we're going to run a quick poll now on which of those three pressures are hardest for your team to manage at scale. So we've got that compliance piece. You've got that, so the first one is that compliance and regulation. Is that the most pressing one? Is it resident centricity is the hardest one? Perhaps it's that operational efficiency, just trying to get stuff done well. Or is it all three? Are all three kind of really challenging for you at equal measures? So we'll give about 10, 15 seconds. Fastest finger first. Off we go. Oh, see some votes coming in. This is good. This is interesting. I love running polls. I love seeing what people think and feel. Okay, 5 more seconds. Put those votes in now. 3, 2, 1. Let's close the poll. Okay, so on top there, we've got the resident centricity seems to be the driving piece. So I think this is really core, and we see this a lot when we sit down and talk to residents as well. They're used to services that look like their Amazon or Tesco shopping. They're intuitive, they know them, they're centered around them, they give them choices. And then they're kind of experiencing the housing provider and they're not quite sure how it kind of marries up to those other services. And I think it's this balance of how do you support them in the moment that they need you, but also how do you manage those predictive and proactive pieces in the homes that kind of make residents feel like, oh wow, my landlord is really thinking about me all the time and is there to support me. I think the second one here that's come through strongly is that operational efficiency. So again, I'm not surprised that efficiency is coming through strongly. It can feel so overwhelming. I mean, I don't know if any of you saw some of the stats that came through in the media recently in terms of repair costs have increased by 11% from 23-24 to 24-25, costing approximately £5,000 per property, according to Housemark. And then that staggering figure from Housing Today that the estimated current bill to manage repairs for 24-25 is at 10 billion. So wow, this is feeling very costly to be efficient in the sector. So regardless of what you choose, I think the root issue for us when we think about this from Switchee is, can you understand what's going on in a home? Do you have that real-time visibility of the conditions, how a resident is experiencing the home, to help you make more informed and efficient choices to deliver that great customer service, which is really core and coming through in the poll here, but also those savings importantly. So we'll close the poll there, thank you. So let's look at what we came up with to help. So many of you already know we have a really successful solution in the market. This is our smart thermostat, and it works with many of the challenges that we've already discussed here. However, we saw an opportunity to solve perhaps some unmet needs with a slightly different solution that we could bring to the Switchee ecosystem. So first is the kind of ease and speed of installation. So Switchee thermostats are fantastic at giving detailed insights in both environmental performance and, importantly, heating performance. But to do that heating performance piece, it does require to be connected to the heating system, and that requires a qualified electrician. Now, getting hold of electricians, for any of you on the call that is your day job, gosh, I feel sorry for you. It can be tricky to line up electricians that are available with residents' kind of access, and then try and meet those timelines that require that really fast response that is in days rather than weeks now. So we needed a product that could be carried on operatives' vans, that required no specialist training to install, and literally take minutes to stick into rooms that needed more insight. The second kind of unmet need we saw is needing faster insights. We needed our data and insights to be able to feed back in 24 hours or less to help our clients know what's going on in that home, to aid that quicker resolution. Waiting for weeks for a reading just wouldn't work for our clients trying to meet Arab's Law, for example. And thirdly, the other piece was where the cost sort of lays in organizations. We are obviously a strong believer in the overall kind of proposition, the value for money, and the ROI that you see with Switchee thermostats. However, we know that post a pilot, the purchase can often become quite a strategic decision, rightly, and does require more governance and levels of sign-off. And this can mean that a smart thermostat probably isn't suitable for kind of short-term tactical fixes or getting access to budgets that maybe have lower kind of per unit cost sign-off. So there's a real gap there of how we could help those teams as opposed to the more strategic piece. So we spent about 9 months developing not only a device that was industry grade in terms of accuracy and reliability so that our clients could have data that they can trust, but we also wanted to ensure that the data that we provide our clients with from devices is fast, is actionable, and accessible in the flow of work. So we'd like to welcome Swift. So this is Swift. We'll have a look at the device itself. I've got one here in my hand. So you can see it kind of fits in the palm of my hand. It's kind of it's quite neat. It's quite discreet, which I like. I usually have this in my bathroom. And it's a battery-powered device that can monitor environmental data. So it senses temperature and humidity, and an upgraded version can monitor CO2 and know that air quality in the home. So it's got that battery life of 10 years, and it's designed with easy installation in mind, as I've said. It comes with self-adhesive tabs to kind of stick on the back into the wall of a room where we want to understand or monitor conditions. What you'll do then is grab your app for installation. Typically takes between 3 to 5 minutes when we've timed it from start to finish of installation. And that's just making sure that the device, we know where the device is, both in terms of property and location, and we can also check that it's working as well. So with that easy installation, we've also thought about reinstallation as well. So we've designed it so that once that job is done in a home, you've done the measurements pre and post an intervention, you can see that that risk has reduced. You might want to move it out of that home and put it in the next resident's home to maximize that value. We also hear from clients that it's really helpful. I'm just going to leave it in the home because actually I want to see kind of seasonal variations and just have that assurance around what's going on in that home and that data. Thirdly, we don't link to the resident's Wi-Fi. We use a secure mobile SIM within the device to bring that data back into our portal. And that data sits alongside all our other devices and sensors. So you've just got kind of one place to go. I know when I mention Wi-Fi phone signal, this can come up as a bit of a question for folks in terms of coverage. But actually our roaming SIMs can connect to multiple networks to keep that coverage as high as possible. And in addition, the device can hold up to about 200 days of data when it doesn't have coverage. And when that coverage comes back, it can send that data back into the cloud as well. So that data is not lost. The other piece, which is really important and feels like it's important for all of you on the call, is that resident piece as well. So I think it's important to talk about the resident perspective, especially around privacy. This device, and all of our devices actually, don't listen to you. It can't see you as a resident, and it's purely environmental monitoring. We find from residents that once they understand that their privacy is not compromised, and that this is a device that's looking to give assurance that their landlord is looking after them, it's often a welcomed installation conversation, especially if it's off the back of a damp and mold complaint. Finally, and all importantly, that price point. So this device comes in from £99 for the device itself. And our feedback so far was that that really works for operational budgets. I'm a damp and mold lead and I just need to get access to some data. It kind of works from that perspective. And really, when you look at the cost around disrepair cases and fines, it kind of pales in significance. So once we launched the product, we've seen our clients have used it for a lot of the hazard analysis. So I've mentioned a lot on the call today about damp and mold, but also around over or under heating as well. It's really good. It has that data and the algorithms to help you understand that. The other piece that we're seeing coming through as well is that it's helping to inform retrofit strategies. So putting a device in, understanding how that home is really performing, gives you a level of detail and understanding that an EPC just doesn't give you. So in summary, we're seeing a couple of key areas that Swift is already delivering value for clients. So we've got that simplicity piece, that simple installation of sticking it to the wall, registering that device, meaning anyone could do it. Housing officers, damp and mold operatives, it's meant to be very, very simple. And the simplicity also comes into the insights. Like I said, we use the same portal and API as we use for our smart thermostats, which for anyone who's already using that, we feel that it gives really clear and easy risk analysis. as well as recently bringing through the ability to show the causation and the recommendation for those riskiest properties. That speed of insights, swift, clue is in the name. We purposely made sure that you're receiving insights as well as recommendations and causations within 24 hours. And it's all backed by our tried and tested algorithms in damp and mould, underheating and overheating, which we're really proud we were one of the market leaders here that we've been developing for over 7 years. That practical operational value, we see this not only helping with diagnosing issues, but really understanding persistent and recurring issues as well that require that long-term monitoring, especially in cases of disrepair. And then I mentioned it at the top of the call, we needed something that could work in the flow of work. And for this to be most useful, we need that integrations. So our API serves up great data into whichever systems you're using. We typically see our clients bringing the data into Power BI reports for kind of greater analysis and understanding, but also bringing it into housing management systems such as Salesforce and NEC. You may have seen us recently shout about our recent partnership with Plentific, where we've built an out-of-the-box integration between Switchee data and their operations and maintenance platform. The idea being that if you have our data and our recommendations, you want to do something with it. And either manually or automatically, you want to trigger some actions and resolutions to help those residents. So we've been working with a few clients on a trial to kind of bring Plentific and Swift devices to life. We do have 1, maybe 2 more slots in that trial. So what we'll do after the call is we'll share ways that if you are interested, you can get in touch and see how that could work for you. But you've heard enough from me now. Don't take my word for it. I'm going to pass over to Tom now, who's going to share some of the examples from our clients who are already benefiting from using Swift.
Great, thanks, Sam. So what I've got now is just a couple of examples of housing providers who have deployed Swift. We officially launched Swift in December of last year. So we've got just over 5 months of having it out there in the market. Since then, we've actually had 13 different housing providers trial it or deploy it in some way. So I just picked out a couple of the more interesting ones. The first one here is anonymized. We're hoping to have a named case study out that we can share with everybody in a bit more detail soon. We're just waiting for that to get signed off. And then the second one I'm going to talk to is with PA Housing Association. So if we start with this one first, damp and mould. So this is a large housing association up in the northeast of England. Interestingly, they were already trialing Switchee smart thermostats. So we are being specified into their new build units, and they've been using that to actually validate whilst in warranty period with contractors that the homes are fit for purpose. And if there's any issues, they've actually got evidence to go back to them and make sure that repairs are delivered in a timely manner. So we already had that as a stream of work with them, but actually the repairs and maintenance team at the time felt that the smart thermostat wasn't necessarily appropriate because of the speed they'd have to be reacting at, and they didn't, to Sam's point, have electricians lined up and ready to go to make that a feasible solution. So once they heard about Swift, they actually re-engaged us because it felt like it ticked a lot more boxes for them and their team and what they were trying to do. So a couple of the challenges they were facing, they were seeing a really high volume of repeat repair visits. So they'd go in, they'd do the first fix, and quite often there'd be 2, 3, 4 visits after that, where the cases would be closed and a couple of months later reopened by the customer. In some cases, up to 7 or 8 repeat visits there to get to a completed remediation. Like I mentioned, they didn't have people with electricians that were qualified, ready to go install the smart thermostats. So what that meant was putting the Switchee smart thermostat in wasn't feasible, and so they were then started to put Swifts in because anybody can install them, as Sam explained there. The other interesting thing about this, we found that they didn't necessarily always know what the heating system would be in the home before we went there. Lots of disparate data, difficult to actually confirm with 100% confidence what the person visiting the home would actually find. Again, with the smart thermostat having to link up to the heating, that meant there was a chance we could get there and it might not be compatible if there was maybe some unique heating system in place. So using Swift actually de-risked that as a possibility. So what we ended up doing was they've got now a floating stock of Swifts across their damp and mould team. And once they are called out to a visit, they will, on first visit, put a Swift in. whilst they're doing that initial inspection. They're then using that data to confirm that any remediation is completed, but to Sam's point, start to look at what causality could potentially be and maybe change their recommendation for what the fix could be based on what we're seeing in the data. We've actually, off the back of that, got two things that could happen. Firstly, they have decided they may leave the Swifts in because they're getting useful data from the home and make sure that no repeat visits happen in future. Or secondly, when appropriate, and there's a visit from someone else who is a qualified electrician, actually taking that Swift out, putting it back into the floating stock, and actually installing the smart thermostat along with a Ventaxia fan that we can partner with. So yeah, an interesting use for Swift, and I think it's a good example of it's not a one size fits all. They're really picking and choosing, depending on the use case, what solution's best for them. Now, the next example I want to talk to is about overheating, and that is with PA Housing. So PA Housing have a building called Canada Court in London. Some of you may have seen it recently in the news because residents have been complaining about overheating. Again, for a bit of background, PA Housing are a current Switchee customer. They've already got about 300 smart thermostats across their estate already, and that's across multiple use cases. However, in this instance, the residents were complaining that the Canada Court was particularly hot even in winter months. The initial response from PA was to have people go out and do manual checks. They were taking temperature recordings manually, but what they found was there's two problems. One, it was expensive because you're paying for somebody to be there. And two, it was only a point in time. There was no ongoing monitoring, so you couldn't see how different factors may impact the heating. So for example, what was the weather that day, or what time of day was the reading taken? So that constant monitoring provided the much more detailed granular data. So what they ended up doing was taking 118 Swifts in total, and they installed them across both people's homes, but also the communal areas, because actually one of the complaints was it's really, really hot in some of the communal areas. And we've placed them in multiple areas across multiple floors. And what that's actually provided them is really detailed data about where are the problems worse. They've already identified some floors are worse than others, and even some ends of floors are worse than other ends of floors. And they've actually been able to provide that data along with other information like the building plans to a consultant who's now helping them make sure they get something in place that's going to stop this being such a big issue before the summer months come along. And they're actually using the data to identify what the right fix is, but also where those fixes should go to have the biggest impact in the building. So there are a couple of examples there. I think we're going to move on to some key takeaways now. Great. So I've mentioned it already, but what we're really seeing, especially when somebody's already a customer with Switchee and on that IoT journey, is it's certainly not a one size fits all. It's not the smart thermostat is the way to go or Swift is the way to go. It's actually dependent on the use case and what you're trying to achieve by putting monitoring into that home. How quick does it need to be? How much detail do we need about how the resident's using the heating system? Do we want to use the messaging on the smart thermostat, or are we happy that the environmental data is all we need to do what we want to do in this situation? So these are all the kind of conversations that we've now learned and we're having with our customers before we recommend which is more appropriate. The other interesting thing is a lot of customers who maybe have been nervous about making that step into in-home monitoring and using IoT actually see Swift as a much more gentle way into it for a couple of reasons. First one being the price. It allows them to see what data they can gather from the home without a huge commitment on price. But also it gets something started, it gets collecting data. They can start to see how that data can be used in their processes and their teams before they then look at what the wider strategy may look like and start to inform that. As Sam's mentioned a few times and as shown in the examples, especially PA Housing, Swift gives the real speed. You don't need to worry about the install. Anybody can go in and do that. The data is gathered straight away. And actually, we found that was one of the key drivers to whether it was Swift or the smart thermostat. So in PA Housing's case, where there was some public noise about what was going on in Canada Court, there was a problem with the residents. They know that they want to get it sorted before the summer months because it's bearable at the moment, but it's only going to be exacerbated as it gets warmer. They really wanted to make sure they had a fix in for the residents. Swift was perfect for that. So that's another key driver we're seeing on whether you choose Swift or the thermostat. But I think regardless of what the choice is, the key thing that we've seen in the last 10 years at Switchee, but even more prevalent today, is the real key to making this successful is making sure you've got a clear plan for who's going to get their hands on that data and how is that going to benefit their team. In both these instances, they knew exactly what the problem was they were trying to solve, who was going to be solving it, and what the benefit could be from having the environmental data. And having that in place is what really made those two projects successful. And I think we've got just over 2 minutes left for any questions. I think we've got one come through here. So Sam, I will ask this one to you. Can we use Swift to verify that a mold or any fix has actually worked over the long term?
Yeah, in short, yes. You can look at both the kind of data to see if those two main factors that I mentioned, the temperature and the humidity in molds, have been impacted. So you go in, do a mold wash, or you go in and do a ventilation assessment and change out a fan. You can look at the data, as I had in a previous slide, and see has it impacted or not. And that's both at the telemetry, so kind of humidity levels and temperature individually, but also in our calculation of our risk metric. I think it's important to stress that Swift can do less well at helping you understand things like time to heat and heat loss rates, as that would be connected to your heating system. So if you think actually there's a fabric issue here, then actually the smart thermostat is going to be needed. But for that kind of immediate kind of understanding of those two main drivers, temperature and humidity, Swift is perfect.
Great, thanks, Sam. I can't see any other questions in the chat at the minute, and also conscious we have just over a minute left. Oh, 2 seconds. We have had one more come through. Can the insights gathered from Swift be integrated directly into our existing asset management system?
Yes, and I'm hoping I've kind of talked a little bit to this in our discussion already. I think we're seeing a real uptick in our clients using API. So we've doubled the number of clients in the last 12 months who are using our API to kind of pull that data through. I mentioned earlier about kind of Power BI has been the dominant one, but also housing management systems. We know that our data is most powerful when combined with housing providers' core data sets. It helps you know how it links to things like vulnerability, repeat cases. There's just a richness of data that you have that once you add our Switchee data on top, it just kind of, it's exponential. And I think the other key piece about that kind of integration is it's in the flow of work. We know that like another portal is not what you need. So actually putting it in there is really helpful. And I think it's fair to say we love working in terms of integrations. We're really happy to play with others, but we often need sort of working with clients to work through those integrations into larger systems. Yeah, in short, yes.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sam. Well, we are at time now. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Hope you find that insightful. There will be a survey that goes out following this and a few other bits and pieces on Swift. And if you are able to provide feedback, that would be really appreciated. So thank you again, everybody.
Thanks all.